This time on Poll Hub, we're looking at the data from our brand new national poll with NPR and the PBS NewsHour. Now, on the surface, it doesn't seem like there's too much to see here. Biden v. Trump is still a really close race, and we're still months away from the election. But if you peel back that top line, there's actually some really interesting stuff here, and that is what we're going to discuss. Then, as college graduation season begins to wind down, we're looking at a very serious and not broadly discussed issue: sexual assault and harassment on campus. There's data suggesting it's sadly quite common, and many colleges have done a lot of work to address this, but has it been enough? We're talking with Marist's Title IX coordinator about this, and we finish with a fun fact, and one in which I think the number one answer is almost certainly going to be the one that Lee picks. We shall see. Stick around. And hi, everybody. Welcome to Poll Hub. I'm JD Dapper.
I'm Barbara Carvalho.
I'm Delaney Hayes.
And I am Lee Maringoff.
So we have a brand new poll with NPR partners, NPR and the PBS NewsHour. And as I suggested in the open, the top line, which is the marquee race here, Biden versus Trump, it gets a lot of attention. Lots of people are doing it. Look, there's a million polls out there saying, is Biden up, is Trump up? What are the numbers and all that? Ours has been very consistent, month in, month out, most of this year with a slight lead for Biden. And that's true in this case. But under the covers, we asked some different questions this time, particularly, I should say, around third-party candidates and not just RFK Jr. And then some other questions about the economy and the environment and climate change that I think are really interesting, too, in kind of portraying where people are on some issues. We don't talk a lot about issues. We talk a lot about personalities now, but there's some really salient issues here. And I think we found some really interesting data there. Where would you like to begin, Barb?
Well, I'm going to actually start with your little tease about the third-party candidates, because I actually found that to be quite interesting, particularly in the light of this week, Trump and RFK Jr. going to the Libertarian Conference and trying to get the Libertarian line, and why that might be something that is really important. When we've been looking at a third-party candidate, most folks have been looking at RFK Jr. and the impact, since he doesn't necessarily have as big a persona as perhaps his name pretends, but he is right now attracting about the same amount of support from both Biden and Trump. So the way we figure that out is we ask people whether they support Biden or Trump first, and then we add a question which includes these other candidates. So he has been, up until this point, pulling pretty evenly from both of them, meaning mostly independents, but independents who lean either Democrat or Republican. We've added in the last couple of rounds, too, a couple of other candidates that are on the ballot. Stein, who people may remember, did have an impact in 2016, and Cornel West, who is also an activist on the liberal Democratic side. I think probably more liberal than Democratic, if people make those distinctions. And interestingly enough, although they're getting low single digits, combined, they pull quite a bit from President Biden. And we don't even have any measurable support for those candidates among Trump supporters. So they are directly impacting this contest, and depending upon the states that they get on, the ballots that they get on, they can have some very significant implications.
Yeah, before we go on to the more data, I think that's a very important point. We're talking about all the minor party candidates, Kennedy, Cornel West, Jill Stein. It becomes a factor as to whether they really get onto the ballot in those states. And these are national numbers, and the impact they have is obviously only if they're on the ballot. And that also, you mentioned the Libertarian Convention. That will, I assume, be in our next poll to see where those folks are, and if they're getting 1 or 2%, what they're getting and who they're taking them from. And that may have a bearing going the other way. So we'll have to see how this plays out. It's such a close contest that the impact of these candidates who may not end up doing even as well in the end as they are now, because that seems to be what happens in third-party candidates, the ballot status issue becomes the name of the game for them.
A couple other points, though, just on the toss-up. We have a question which asks people on a scale their likelihood of voting. And I think it was very interesting this time around that when we looked at people who said that they were definitely going to vote, these are the people who are most motivated. We look at whether they're following politics closely. They're more likely to do that as well. But Biden had a 5 percentage point edge against Trump among these voters last time. And this time it's just neck and neck. And I know these are smaller numbers, certainly everything's you could argue within the error margin, but I think that is something that really needs to be watched, and the intensity of these folks and the likelihood that they will make it to the polls is greater than overall what we look at, as you had mentioned, in the top lines. So that's just one other thing that I think was significant in this poll.
So let's also mention, as we record this on Wednesday, the jury has just gotten the case in the Stormy Daniels. It's not really the Stormy Daniels case. It's the hush money case, or all kinds of different ways to describe it. Anyway, the jury has gotten the case. So who knows what's going to happen there? But at this point, they've just gotten the case, so it could go in any direction. We did ask a question about that. Lee, we have talked a lot on this show about all of the legal issues that Trump has faced during his presidency and then since. There doesn't seem to be a lot of indication in our polling that this case, whatever the jury verdict is, if there's a verdict, whether it's a hung jury or verdict, whether it's going to make any difference. It doesn't seem like there's a lot of indications going to make a difference.
It's really fascinating because people are going to look back at where we are right now politically, and some folks are going to be scratching their head saying, if, let's say, a guilty verdict comes forward, that this was the President of the United States, first of all, it's the first time a former president has been brought up for criminal trial. And if it does end up in any kind of guilty status, it's going to be the first time. And we don't know where that's going to go. Right now, we're doing a hypothetical. What if such and such happens? What are you going to do if he ends up innocent? What are you going to do if he ends up guilty? And as you say, it doesn't move lots of people in any particular direction. That's surprising. But I think the reality may have a little bit of a different effect, at least for enthusiasm, because I can already feel what those scripts are one way or the other. I mean, former President Trump you can almost write his reaction. And my understanding is that President Biden is going to address the nation on the evening when the verdict comes down. And he'll probably talk about how the justice system has worked, regardless of the verdict. I assume that's where he's going to go. So we're in for more of a rocky ride, which has been going on for so long in our politics. But a lot of people think former President Trump has done something wrong, whether it's illegal or unethical. The question is, what impact is this going to have on November voting? And
but I don't know. I don't know if it's so much the candidates it's the team you're on. You know, we did include another question this time around about whether people felt that they were definitely voting for the choice that they gave us, or whether they were likely to change their minds. And we gave them a couple of gradations of that. And about 2/3 of Americans say, yeah, this is the candidate I'm supporting, and there's no way I'm changing my mind regardless of the circumstances. And when we looked at that between Biden and Trump supporters, it was identical. It was 68%. So 68% of each of their supporters basically said, I'm locked in, I'm not moving anywhere. So I think that really characterizes the kind of politics that we are in the middle of right now. And it is going to come down somewhat to some of the issues that we will see probably in the fall after Labor Day. I know you guys like to make this a year-round sport, but I still do think that as we approximate the time where people are actually going to vote, either by mail or in person, that will make a difference for some folks, and particularly those who may be skipping the line. And we did see that there's a little bit more likelihood of younger people, Biden supporters, to say, I may just pass on president this time. I'll be there to vote for Senate and Congress or whatever elections are in one's particular state. But they may just be turned off by the presidential campaign.
I got a quick question for both Jay and Barb. On a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 meaning, doesn't make any difference, and 10 meaning, I know everything I need to know about the election right now. How much stock do you put in the polls? There's so many national and swing state polls out. Barb just made, I think, a very good point that we're learning about just how locked in some of the voters are for both of them and how different definite voters may have changed. But if one is, I couldn't care less, and 10 means I know everything I need to know, and thank you, we're done. Jay, where do you go on that?
I mean, I'm at the low end of the scale only because it's May and we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what's going to happen in this trial. We don't know what's going to happen in the world. I mean, China could blockade Taiwan or invade Taiwan. Russia could invade Estonia or something. Anything could happen that could completely upend this. So I think our polls and everybody else's polls are helpful to kind of get a snapshot of right now. But in this world, right now, doesn't tell me almost anything about November, the first week of November.
Well, you know what? Wait a second, though, Jay. You did tease that we had done some issue stuff. So before we go, what struck you in this poll?
Yeah, so we asked about, and this is an old question, and it was interesting to me what the answer is this time around. Do you prioritize economic growth or protecting the environment? And this is a question that's been around a long time, and by and large, Americans in general, over a long period of time, have kind of said, well, the economy, and we really like economic growth, but it does ebb and flow. If you look back over the trend in the different polls that have asked this, it does depend a bit on the economy. If the economy is really bad, people tend to choose the economic growth. We asked, and 49%, just shy of a majority, said they think the environment should be given priority, even if it risks curbing economic growth. That surprised me. And then 4 in 10 said that climate change is a top priority, and another 38%. So basically, more than three quarters say it is an important or top priority issue. I think that's important because those are two issues that are really salient in the minds of voters, but not something that the candidates necessarily are talking about or the media is talking about. They like to talk about the personalities. Yeah. So I think it's really interesting.
Yeah, we'll move on, but certainly those two issues have not gotten their airing. That was a pun.
Well, switching gears to a topic that can affect anyone, but disproportionately affects women, and that is sexual harassment, sexual violence, particularly on college campuses. I'd like to bring in Delaney Hayes, newly graduated from Marist College. Delaney is working with us over the summer at the poll and before she goes off to law school in the fall. And I know you've done some research on this, Delaney. Welcome. And what do you have for us?
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, with the help of my other colleagues this summer who are working with me, specifically Hunter, we kind of really dove into the numbers of this topic. The segment was originally framed off of the title Every 68 Seconds. And this actually is a really interesting stat that comes from the Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network, which says that someone in the United States is sexually assaulted every 68 seconds. But I think it's really important to remember that with all these kind of numbers and pieces that I'll go through that, we have a lot of pieces of research, but what comes with the topic of reporting sexual assault is kind of the story itself. And that is the difficulty of measuring the frequency due to the lack of reporting of these instances. So I think that's really important to keep in mind. Nearly 80% of the sexual harassment claims between 2018 and 2021 were filed by women. As Barbara had mentioned, this mainly is an issue that affects people who identify as female. And also, as Barbara had mentioned, it's really important and it really affects college-aged individuals and especially women, who have gone through college. Another really alarming statistic is that women on college campuses are twice as likely to be sexually assaulted than robbed, which I find extremely startling. You don't want to think about either of those scenarios when you're going through college, but just something that's really concerning.
Yeah, and the first statistic was according to the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, that claims are more likely to be filed by women. And the second is actually the Department of Justice. And that's a report back from December of 2014.
And although these statistics are quite alarming, we have seen movements like the Me Too movement where women are coming forward to report these instances of sexual assault. And this really seemed to kind of help break the previous notion of staying quiet after a victim has been assaulted. But there certainly still is this disconnect between, we see the statistic of someone is sexually assaulted every 68 seconds. And then we also have a statistic from an October 2023 Gallup poll, which asked of U.S. adults, how often do you worry about being sexually assaulted? And 46% said never. And an even more interesting statistic, I think, from this poll was they asked the respondents if they or another member of the household had been sexually assaulted in the past 12 months, and 97% said no. So there is some kind of disconnect here with, this negative stigmatization around sexual assault and the lack of reporting. And as I had mentioned, although the Me Too movement has helped to kind of decrease this negative connotation around this subject, there certainly is more work to be done.
Well, I'd like to bring in Kelly Yough. She is the Title IX coordinator here at Marist College. Certainly, this is a topic that is near and dear to what you do here at Marist College. Just to start, let's remind our audience what Title IX is, particularly on college campuses, and how does this issue end up at your doorstep?
First of all, thank you for having me. My office oversees Title IX at Marist College. Every college in the country, by law, has a Title IX coordinator. So Title IX protects people on the basis of sex and education programs and activities that receive federal funding. So every college that receives federal funding follows Title IX, and that includes sexual orientation and gender identity. So my job as the coordinator is to oversee the process of intaking all Title IX complaints, as well as all sexual misconduct complaints or complaints based on gender, sex, or gender identity discrimination and harassment.
So I obviously, like I said, I went to Marist and I am a recent grad. And the only I'm trying to remember some sexual assault training, and I am an athlete at Marist too, and the NCAA required us to go through a training, and I believe Marist does as well. Just on that point, can you talk about how Marist has tried to progress in their efforts specifically at the college level in helping raise awareness around sexual assault, or how does your office specifically do this on ground at Marist?
So I've been at Marist for 3 years. When I started at Marist in 2022, we hired an outreach coordinator, which was new to the college. And her name is Eliza Benfer. And she does a comprehensive training program starting in the summer, actually, with all new students. We do an onboarding program for all incoming students, not just freshmen. That includes pre-professional, graduate, and undergraduate. And that's an online course. We also then attend new student orientation all summer long. And then that in August at the end, we actually get in front of every new student at new student orientation with student affairs and talk about the programs and outreach that we have at the college. And so students can see who we are. If they need to report, they know who we are, where we are, and our resources. As you mentioned, we also do all student athletes and student leaders. That's required by the law. And that's every year. If you're participating in a sport or a student leader position on a college campus in New York, you have to be trained to the policy, the support, and the resources, because we see you as someone on campus that's a leader to other students so that you could help students find the support they need if they happen to need our office. And then we also do programming through Eliza's office on a monthly basis. So she works with our resident assistants, all our clubs. She gets into classrooms. She meets with first-year seminar. So we've really tried a comprehensive approach in the last 3 years that I've been here at Marist.
Just from your own experience, why do you believe there's so much stigma associated with sexual assault, particularly on a college campus? You're saying you're doing a lot of outreach and connections so people at least know where to go. But do you still see the issue of non-reporting to be significant?
I think it always will be. Sexual assault is one of the most traumatic and personal incidents a person can go through, and everyone experiences that on their own timeline. Some people may want to report right away and get their story out, and that helps them through their healing process, but everyone's different. Someone may come to me 4 years later and report that they were assaulted freshman year, and some may never report. And that's not really for me to say why they don't report, but I know from experience that everyone's on their own timeline and everyone handles the traumatic experience differently. And we're here to support a person through whatever step they're in or whatever support they need.
And I know you said that you can't directly speak to why some people have a different timeline, but in general, what do you think are some of the reasons why women feel it is easier to not report these crimes?
Some general reasons that I hear are they don't think it's important enough to report. They don't think they'll be believed. They don't want to relive the experience. And some are cultural, obviously. In some cultures, women especially don't want to report against someone in their own community. It would be easier to deal with that trauma than report to the police or report to me or go through the process. But it's important to get out there that even if you don't report the incident, Title IX has so many resources that we can still support the person without having to go through a process if you don't want to. And if you change your mind, you can still go through the process later, but we're here for support as well.
Do you think the Me Too movement, that we have experienced over the last few years has helped, this process of reporting or, not made any difference? Not so to paraphrase a survey question, but what is the impact that you see that it has had or not?
I don't think the numbers have changed on our campus. I think the Me Too movement has been wonderful, but it has attached some high-profile personalities to it and has become more of a media campaign. I think that we've been doing the work for a number of years on college's campus, and the numbers still haven't changed. And that's because, again, it's what I said before, it's personal. Everybody is different. I think we at Marist have done a very good job of letting students know we're here, but even though they know we're here, it's up to the student whether or not they use our resources.
So adding on to that, we have another stat here that according to a 2022 Pew Research poll, 70% of Americans believe that those who commit sexual harassment at work are more likely to be held responsible now than 5 years ago. So kind of along with the Me Too movement and, maybe not specifically just at Marist. Do you think that has been a contributing factor to this, or what do you think has been a contributing factor to this rise in, the general destigmatization around sexual assault reporting?
Well, I've been honestly doing this a very long time, and Title IX has been around since 1972. However, since 2020, Title IX has been in the spotlight with each presidential election. So we can't ignore it now. It's always been there. I was doing this work in 2015 when New York State put a uniform policy in place. But even before that, Title IX existed, but it wasn't sexual assault focused. We had a policy, a discrimination and harassment policy, but now sexual assault has become more on the forefront because of the Title IX regulations. And that includes sexual harassment, sexual assault, stalking, dating violence, domestic violence. But it's always been there. We've always had a policy. I think more and more lay people, I guess to say, are more aware of it now because of the 2020. And now there's new regulations coming forward in 2024 in August. So I guess it's more in the forefront, if that makes sense.
So here at the college and also, in the workplace, very often staff and students go through training as to what to do. And most of it is to direct them to the resources that are available. For those who aren't really lucky enough to have a Title IX coordinator, in their lives because of where they work or not being on a campus, what recommendation would you give to them to support or to direct someone who has experienced sexual assault?
So if we're talking work specific, I would go to HR. If you're not on a college campus, that would be Title IX would only pertain to an
Right.
education program or activity. But obviously at work, if you're in New York, every employee by law in New York has to take sexual harassment training. So that goes through HR on a normal place that's not a college. So I would encourage someone to connect with HR if they felt comfortable. If not, there's also resources in the community. For example, in Dutchess County, we have family services that they will work directly with victims of crime, not just sexual misconduct, but other victims of crime as well. And they're very well trained on how to get a person help through both legally, health-wise. They will take you to the hospital, they'll help you with the SANE exam, and help you through the whole investigation. And every community has those resources. So again, it's really up to the person whether or not they feel comfortable reporting at work. But if they don't, there are resources in the community that one could reach out to.
And National Sexual Abuse Hotline as well.
Sure, yes.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Kelly Yough, the Title IX coordinator here at Marist College. We so very much appreciate you taking the time to talk with us today about this very important issue.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Okay, let's switch gears dramatically right now for our fun fact. And as Jay noted in the introduction, this is indeed this week a fun fact. So our friends at the Roper Center have provided us the results of a 2015 national poll that asked people who are 18 to 34 years of age. So I don't even know if I get a chance to talk about this topic, but I guess I'll weigh in at some point. The question was, which of the following comedians do you think would make the best president? Which of the following comedians do you think would make the best president? And the choices are people like Stephen Colbert and Jon Stewart, Tina Fey, down all the way to John Oliver, Jay Farrow. The winner, not surprisingly, 18%, Stephen Colbert, and Jon Stewart follows.
He's at 19%.
19, I'm sorry.
Don't know is 18%.
Well, maybe that's somebody who just doesn't like any of these people and doesn't think these people aren't funny at all. Jon Stewart at 17, Tina Fey also at 17. The only other double digit is David Chappelle at 15. And as you said, the don't know is also clocking at 18. Everybody else on the list in single digits. But Stephen Colbert and Jon Stewart, Tina Fey, well, they got a lot of votes between them. And I would be a Stephen Colbert backer only because he has experience running for president, which he did in 2008 when he ran for president of South Carolina, which we were actually part of polling for. But that's a little bit of a tangent. Let us go around to the young folks in our area. We have two people going to join in, one you've already heard from. And they are, we're going to have three people. The two I'm going to go to first, though, have recently minted BA diplomas from Marist College. And I want to congratulate you both, and I hope you had a wonderful graduation. But we're going to go to Delaney. First, tell me how good graduation was, and then let's find out who you think is funny.
Graduation was great. The highlight was Lee got to meet my parents, which was great.
Yeah, it was
and
fun.
anyway, yeah, back to the question. I would have to go with Tina Fey for two simple reasons. One, she is a woman. Two, I love Mean Girls, and I love her role in Mean Girls. So, yeah, Tina Fey.
Okay, there you go. That's and you're not alone, obviously. She's certainly up in the numbers. Athen, how was graduation?
Oh, graduation was great. You know what? I'm going to have to agree with you, Lee. I'm also going to go with Stephen Colbert. I think he seems like the most politically aware of the option.
And there's another vote, and then we're going to turn it over to Hunter.
Yeah, I gotta be honest. I feel like I'm gonna have a really unpopular opinion here again, but I'm gonna go with Dave Chappelle. I think he falls middle of the line pretty well, but I also really like someone who's just super blunt, and Dave Chappelle is very blunt. So I gonna have to go with Dave.
I think you have a much better sense of appreciation for this because you think I'm funny and I'm not blunt. So
And you're not funny. So, yeah.
Okay, there you go. Well, then I'm not going to call on you right now. I'll call on Barbara, who doesn't think I'm funny at all either. But anyway, Barb, what do you like in the list?
Well, yes, Hunter, I had that observation too. I didn't think I was surprised that there weren't some more middle-of-the-road comedians. Certainly, this was a question that was asked back in 2015. So these are the folks that were making the news on the comic side of the ledger. But if I had to choose, I think I would choose Jon Stewart. And the reason I choose Jon Stewart is because he actually, I thought, had one of the best ideas during the 2009-2010 recession when we had the housing collapse. And his thought was that instead of giving all this money, the federal government giving all our money to those fat folks who big corporations and financial institutions that had funded the housing crisis, he thought that money should simply go to people who had their mortgages so that they could pay their mortgages, keep their houses, and indirectly those financial institutions would get their money back. And it's kind of what Trump did during the pandemic. Where although he did provide dollars to support small businesses and large businesses to keep going during the pandemic, every taxpayer also, or most taxpayers also did get a boost in a check that I think did help support the local communities because they spent it on things like housing and food and necessities. So Jon Stewart, I do remember that suggestion that he made to President Obama on his show, and I think that would have been a good suggestion.
Separated him out from the pack, but not in his comedic role, as he hasn't been either when he's been talking about veteran benefits, where he's made a lot of impact in that area. But again, not in a funny way, in a serious way, in a policy way. Jay the Dapper, where do you fall on this?
Well, so it comes down to whether you read the question as who would actually make a good president, and Barb read the question that way, or which comedian would you like to see as president, and Hunter read the question that way. So I'm going to pick Tina Fey because I think she'd do both. I think she'd actually be a good president on policy, and I like her. I like her from 30 Rock. I like her from a lot of things, but I love her from 30 Rock. Mean Girls is a reboot, so anyway. So that would be my choice.
Let us not forget her Sarah Palin imitation, however. So she's actually has vice presidential chops.
She's played a vice president. Yeah. So there's that.
There you go. And I'm going to ask you one last question. Jay the Dapper, as a keen observer of our politics for many years, why are candidates for president, major party candidates, why don't they try to be funny at all? They're not funny.
Because trying to be funny, if you're not funny.
In the debates, you never see anybody say anything clever.
Trying to be funny, if you're not funny, is way worse than just not being funny. That's my answer.
Take note, Lee. Take note.
I was just going to leave it right there, and maybe the editor will be kind to me, but maybe not. Anyway, see you next week, folks.
That'll do it for Poll Hub this week.
Poll Hub is produced by the Marist Poll at Marist College in Poughkeepsie, New York.
Mary Griffith is our executive producer. Casey Schaff is our production supervisor.
The Poll Hub team includes Athen Hollis, Delaney Hayes, and Hunter Petro.
If you enjoy Poll Hub, consider telling a friend about us.
If you'd like to learn more about polling and survey science, check out the Marist Poll Academy, our free online learning portal.
If you have questions for us, tweet them at us at Marist Poll.
Remember, you can always tell your smart speaker to play Poll Hub, and with any luck, it'll cooperate.
And finally, wherever you listen to Poll Hub, there is a subscribe button.
Click it, and the latest episode will be ready for you in your podcasting app
as soon as it's released.
We'll see you next time.